Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today and for bearing with us when we had a little bit of technology issues. Wouldn't be a hybrid meeting if we didn't get a little bit of that. I have the agenda. I think it was emailed out to everybody that we had a list of who was coming. Here it is. So we'll do introductions, give an overview of the locally led process and sort of what we're hoping to do here today. Gonna talk about the current resource documents that help us understand the conditions of the district, including the basin plan. We'll reflect on the results of the survey data, look at last year's fund pool proposal and talk about how that's worked or not worked for everybody, and then make some decisions about what we want to do going forward as a working group. Our land acknowledgement, we want to respectfully acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Abenaki people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. And then we will do introductions. So there's anyone here I don't know. My name's Corey Ross. I'm the Executive Director for the Windham County Natural Resources Conservation District. I live right here in Brattleboro. I've been with the district for a little over 5 years. If we can just go around this room and then go around the Zoom. May, I'll put you on the spot next.
Hi, May. I am one of the agricultural resource specialists at the Conservation District. I started at the end of September last year. And I'm new to Brattleboro. Nice to meet you.
My name is Louise Pfeffer. I live in rural Rockingham and I'm here to listen. My primary interest where I live is in Saxon River riparian buffer and invasive species management, creating a canopy, hopefully working with the wildlife committee to make it an easy place for people to enjoy.
My name is Sharon. I use they them pronouns. And I am the owner operator of Giant Journey Farm in Newton, Vermont. We're transitioning, we're a CFA farm, amongst other things. We're transitioning to a collective model. So actually, we're gonna move from just doing the CFA to actually just getting food, like just to community folks who need it through, like community organizations like Food Health and community food projects in Brattleboro. So we're like in a transitional phase right now, but yeah, it's just like trying to find new things, and so agriculture and naturalist.
I'm Michelle Simpson. I'm the Executive Director at Bonneville Environmental Ed Center, and I came to one of the last meetings and learned a lot, and I'm just here again to listen and learn a bit. And of course, I'm a dairy farmer up in Windham, Vermont, chair of this conservation district, president of the Vermont Association of Conservation Districts, and also serve in one of those roles on the Natural Resource Conservation Council. So Southeast Advisory Union Rep.
Patty Smith, I work at Bonneville. And I would say my areas of special interest are native plants, pollinators, and beaver generated wetlands.
I think it's me. Hi, my name is Emma Keister. I work as a soil conservationist in the Brattleboro field office for the Natural Resource Conservation Services for the NRCS, and we're the agency that helps distribute the local fund pool. Yeah.
Dana Rupert, I work for the UVM extension. I'm part of the agricultural business team. I used to work with the conservation district years ago. Yeah, worked with a lot of farmers, maple producers, and forest landowners.
Hi, I'm Isabel Bowman. I'm a conservation specialist with the Conservation District. And I've been with the district for 2 years.
Hi, I'm Marie Levette Canuto. I'm with the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. I'm the watershed planner for this region.
And then folks online, how about Kelly?
Sorry, I'm doing all my audio clicks here. Kelly Stetner, I'm the district manager for the Ottaquechee Natural Resources Conservation District.
Thanks for being here today, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Last but not least, Olivia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia Carlson, and I am the acting district conservationist for the Natural Resource Conservation Service. And Emma Keister summed up it very well, what the NRCS does.
One
more person.
Oh, yes, David.
David Erickson, former conservation professional and now citizen at large.
And podcaster. Okay. I had this better structured on my computer. Okay. So need to let me share my screen so people online can see, or can you?
You would have to share your screen.
Oh yeah, I got you.
Oh, I can share it and click along with you, I guess.
Well, that's probably unnecessarily complicated. Let me just share my screen. All right, where did it go? So just a little bit of overview of this process. The locally led conservation process and the local working group, which is one part of that process, have actually been in policy for a very long time. And the process has kind of gone dormant in Vermont in a lot of districts until maybe 4-ish years ago. There was a major effort to revitalize it. State conservationist Travis Thomason made it a priority, wanting this local input into their programs and their funding decisions. So this is in the process of sort of being rolled back out and expanded upon. Each year we do it, we hope to make it a little more robust and a little more inclusive, and just going thorough. So local work groups are subcommittees of the state technical committee. And our role is to make recommendations to USDA on their programming based on local priorities and concerns. The state technical committee itself is an advisory group to the state conservationist, which is currently Travis Thomason, and then he is the ultimate decision maker about USDA programming. So the objective is to provide the state technical committee as much information as possible so that he has as much information as possible to make the best decisions. We do share the results of this process with other agencies, with state agencies, with local partners, with towns. So it's focused on that USDA system, but that's not the only place that we're going to use this feedback. We also use it to inform district programming. So when we're trying to decide what grants we might chase or how we might focus on new staff positions or evolving staff roles, this is very informative for us in that process. So local work groups, according to policy, they can include local partners such as municipalities, extension service, community members, egg producers, landowners, land stewards, nonprofits, state partners from a whole variety of agencies, and federal partners from a variety of agencies that have that work around these content areas of natural resources. And that's kind of who gets invited each year to this. This is a public meeting. It's subject to open meeting law. That's why it's being zoomed and recorded. And as I discussed a little bit, this is the process we're undertaking. It's a little, we'll make some decisions today about how much of this we're going to accomplish today and how much we might kick down the road. So first thing will be to review the resource concern survey results. That's our effort to gather public input, as well as relevant basin plans and any other planning documents or assessment documents we want to use. Identify any gaps in our current knowledge and decide if there are needs for further discussion or study. So one thing we could do today is say there's an area that we don't know enough about. And so maybe we want to have a subgroup go dig into that a little bit. And then depending on how we feel about if we have the full picture, we can identify those priority resource concerns and make recommendations to the state technical committee. We'll produce a written document that goes to them, and that's March 17th, I think, is the due date.
That sounds great.
It's mid-March. And then at the April meeting of the state technical committee, we'll actually go make a presentation to share with the committee, hey, this is what we've learned. We'll also look to identify local needs that current programming doesn't meet. That's one of the objectives of this process, is to say, are there NRCS initiatives that don't meet those needs? And if so, can we propose programs to counter that? They keep changing the language on us every year, but one thing that will be new to us in Windham County this year is we're expected to write a conservation action plan, which is a little bit more of a formal document that says, okay, based on the natural resources assessment, These are the really important concerns that we see that need to be addressed. And then based on that, we can decide to submit local fund pool proposals is what they've been called in the past. And I think that name is changing again. Olivia, do you know? I know Travis has talked about it. He's referred to them as mini RCPPs, which can sometimes be confusing.
I'm looking at and so for the final local led conservation planning, that's March 28th. And
Okay.
then let me look for the RCPP ones.
The question is it going to be called RCPP, not necessarily the RCPP deadlines?
No, yeah. Travis has talked about changing this into, instead of locally led, sorry, local fund pools, there's a new name, but I'm losing track of it at some point here. Regardless, local fund pools are where we identify a specific concern and we say we're going to set aside money to address that concern locally. And when a producer or landowner, land steward applies to the funding source, they don't compete against applicants throughout the state of Vermont, they just compete locally. So it increases the likelihood that the money gets on the ground when it's needed. Olivia, is there anything you want to add to that?
I would just on August 22nd, 2025, for the fiscal year 2026 for the RCPP applications for that.
Okay. So step one of this for us was we surveyed the public. The survey opened November 14th. It just closed last week. It was anonymous. There were 32 questions. They were mostly the same questions from a year ago. We received 110 responses. I think we had 150 last year. The only difference really was that we didn't advertise on Meta this year. Just philosophically didn't really want to give them any more money. But I think overall we feel good about the response we got. And this is a breakdown of who took the survey. So respondents could classify themselves in more than one bucket. They could say I'm a home gardener and also I am in town government, for example. So these numbers don't add up to the total, they add up to a greater amount. But as you can see, people who use the land recreationally is our largest response class, followed by home gardeners, and then farmers, and then forestry and maple producers, and on down from there.
Question.
Yeah.
In terms of the diversity of people who are respondents, how can we up the number of farmers and forestry producers and things like that? I'm wondering, because the recreators are gonna way heavily skew.
Yeah. Thoughts from the group about how we get better response from farmers and more response?
And obviously it's a time thing and a technology thing, sitting down and, you know.
It's, I'll just say it's farmers, Linda, you can speak to this for sure. They're over surveyed.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
There's some fatigue out there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Not cool. But
And not just farmers, I mean, it's like surveying has become I don't know what you call it, but yeah, that would be part of it.
Yeah.
It's like, I think I did the survey, but honestly, we get so many that it's hard to keep, you know, it's almost like we would want a calendar. And my husband loves doing them, so, you know, I mean, just someone calls, I'm doing a survey, and I'm like, talk to him, I'm gonna hang up on you. But yeah, I'm sure that could be part of it.
Could you table events and have an iPad available for them to fill out in situ?
Yeah, I think, so the timeline for this process has gotten moved up a little bit each year in recent years, and that's out of a goal to align it with when the funding deadlines are. So it's a good thing, but it has caught us a little bit by surprise in recent years. The challenge would be to have those things ready to go during the times of year when we table. There's not a lot of tabling in December usually, which is when this has been open.
Yeah, I actually had the same thought where I was like, wait, last year I feel like this was like much later. I can't believe this is already happening. And I thought I was kind of just moving type of time, but it is a different timeline.
Yeah.
It's kind of great when the survey is open because it is when farmers are most likely to be available to sit on a computer and do something like that. But I had the same thing where I was driving here and I was like, what did they do here? Like, I'm not even sure if I filled it out. Like, oh crap. So I think having something like available, like in place, like when you're tabling or whatever, would be like a really quick way, because then you're not like, it's already built in what you're doing.
Right.
You don't have to like take time when you're like bookkeeping or whatever to like stop and do a survey.
Yeah.
Like as a producer, it's just like, it's a lot on the computer already, so like one month is on the computer.
Yeah.
Like you get washed out.
So I think something we could think about is, I mean, the goal is to sort of standardize this question format so it doesn't change so much from year to year. This would be easy to just say it's running pretty much year round to be feeding into the next time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seen it on Front Porch Forum.
We did put it
It
there.
was there a bunch of times.
Okay.
Every time I saw it, I thought it was a good thing.
Good.
You know, what they say, 3 times, you need to at least 3 times to get people
It's up
to
to 7.
7, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if this question, I mean, it's a little, I don't know, about top, but if there's a way to rank it so you can kind of parse that data a little bit, like what is your primary, like, are you primarily responding as a farmer or as a recreator? And that might help with some of the.
Sure.
Numbers too. Because maybe, you know, a bunch of farmers are also recreators, so that, I mean, the number's still pretty high.
Yeah. And then we did try to break it down among those who identified themselves as farmers. That is just a very important demographic for this work. So we wanted to understand the type of farming that they do. And they, once again, they could select more than one type of farming. As we know, there's a lot of diversification out there. Okay, other breakdown of who took the survey. On the left is the age bracket the respondent falls into. The bigger circle, the bigger the circle, the more people in that bucket. So we are definitely skewed towards older set crowd, with our 2 largest response groups being 55 and older. And then on the right was how long have you farmed? There we go. How long have you farmed or forested? And you can see we have sort of pretty decent breakdown here. About a third of respondents more than 25 years. A little over a third of respondents kind of in that middle 5 to 25 years, and a little under a third of respondents are in that 5 years or less. And we do know there are a lot of new farmers in Windham County. And then in terms of breakdown on racial lines, 91.6% white. That's fairly consistent with the population of Windham County. So one of the questions we ask are, what are the top 3 land uses and water systems you are concerned about? The top response was 79.1% of respondents said streams and rivers. And then 44.5% said wetlands and 43.6% said forests. And probably more illuminating is what resource issues concern you the most. 56.4% identified invasive species. That's consistent from previous years. And then groundwater quality, 52.7, wildlife, the same. And then too much water or flooding, obviously on everyone's minds more and more these days. We also asked, what areas should we focus on addressing? And I wish Heather was here because I think it's was it top 5? Do you remember this at all? It's in the notes for this Canva. I think they could select their top 5. So this is the number of respondents who included an item in their top 5.
Put the longer type for what all these means. So water pollution at 49.1% is pollution from roof, road, and parking lots. And then the one at 45 is water pollution from yards, gardens, and farms. So there's much longer words for all of these, but it's hard to put that on the slide.
Okay. So you can see the top responses here: river corridor integrity, climate change resiliency. That gets broken down into 2 buckets. One is for watersheds and natural communities, and the other one is for human communities in preparation for landslides and flooding. Both received high responses. Rural forest health, pollinator wildlife habitat, water pollution, all among the highest 6. And then water pollution, fish habitat quality and connectivity, and urban stormwater management / clean infrastructure.
Corey, can you press the blue dash on that Zoom box if I'm moving around?
Oh, no, yeah.
No, I can just keep moving it around.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
We also asked if you are familiar with NRCS programs and think you're going to apply for an NRCS program, I think it was in the next 3 years. Which of the following practices do you expect to apply for? You can see here the biggest responses were tree shrub establishment. 8 people expected to apply for that. Brush management, which is basically invasive management. 7 folks expected to apply for that. And then there was a tie composting facility with 6 responses. Great size. Tie was at 5, cover crop 5, fencing 5, and then there's a decent drop off. Oh, sorry, high tunnel system at 4.
Don't forget the stream habitat one there.
I'm sorry.
Don't forget the stream habitat one there, that's long.
It's confusing, so there's too many rows, so
Oh,
that's actually stormwater runoff control. There are ones that don't show up.
We'll take it.
Hmm,
So
I
this,
don't know the difference between these 2 questions.
so this is what people said that they would apply for. The first one was what people feel like they need, but that's different
Got
from
it.
what you have time to apply for.
Okay.
And that's within the next year.
So they seem like mostly, not entirely the same. Access road, forest stand improvement, tree shrub establishment, early successional habitat development, high tunnel systems, livestock shelter, wetland wildlife habitat management. Those are the top responses for what folks expect to apply for.
And the total for those, I'm sorry, the total for those for what people are actually gonna apply for, they're significantly less than what people said they needed. So we can see that there's a clear gap between people having a need and people having the capacity to apply for funding. So that for me would be a huge flag, like in the office of like, how do we close that gap? Cause I'm seeing like the highest is 3, and then next to that is 2, and we were talking before about the difference between 8 and like 5 and 4, and now it's like we're talking like less than half, even maybe a quarter of people who said they needed something, but actually apply for something. That's a huge gap.
And I would maybe add to that, maybe, and ask the question, so then what is that? Is it driven by money, like having to have that 25% share, like contribution, or, you know, kind of, is it capacity, just time, capacity, or is it financial? That might help on the tailor program to develop to help get more conservation ground.
There was a significant difference in response rate, so the last one had 27 responses, and this one. 17.
So that's
10 less people responded.
probably because they're not planning to apply.
Yeah.
Which again says that they may have had a need and are just like, not even gonna happen, not even.
Some of the things that were also identified, I don't know if I know the NRCS staff in the office doesn't know how to plan for those practices, like stormwater, something, that was a practice that was listed. I don't know what that would entail for the NRCS, which is also a deficit that could be addressed to the state office of that we need training on what these practices are that people want in the office.
Does NRCS cover stormwater issue?
It's on there, which, and I'm assuming Heather pulled these all from the
Okay.
NRCS
Wow.
standards list.
That's good.
Yeah, when you do the survey, it links you to the practice.
Yeah.
Okay, so would it be like on that land or?
I literally don't know anything about it, other than those words.
That's a good point. Amy Louise.
That could also reflect the number of people who responded, who said their primary interest is recreational. And that could connect to the local conservation commissions and the local committees, because for those people who are recreational users, there needs to be some kind of organizing principle. Otherwise, you're not going to be engaging in that level of infrastructure and funding.
And you need to have land you're responsible for management of to apply.
Yeah.
That was a question that was posed by a landowner I was with 2 days ago. Was they were part of the Conservation Commission and the town had land, but they didn't know how to apply for programs to help work on that land, but the town also doesn't have the budget to do land management. And so then it was the question of like, do you set up a nonprofit to work with the system better? By the town, and how do you, but again, the time and the commitment.
Are some of these things that could be addressed by changes to the farm bill?
They always could be if we start allowing for municipalities and government to apply for government funding, but that feels like it would still be an issue.
Okay. I just mentioned that because we are in the process of a new farm bill, no one knows when that might come.
But the last one was in 2018 and the other one expired in 2022, so.
That's the federal.
Yeah. Other thoughts about this?
Actually, just to back up on this point, like we had it happen when we started, having NRCS come to the farm and sort of thinking about what we might want to do, what we might need to do, whatever. Then we do have some like water concerns on the farm, but there's no, like just zero engineers to even come. And so I'm seeing like so many water things, and then I actually know that there's zero people here to deal with that. And so firstly, how do we manage, like, if that's what people want, and then we are sort of speaking for, we're speaking on behalf, we're sort of representing Windham County citizens or whatever. Being like, well, yeah, then we should like put that stuff as a priority in the fund pool, except for we know that there's no professional that can do it. So like, I guess as a working group, we sort of have to decide then if we know that there's no professional to deal with that, how do we manage that that's a need?
Yep.
And should we like put funding forward, but if we know that it's not gonna happen, so there's no one here, there's no one here to make it happen.
Right.
So I guess sort of like, it's a question for us as a group. And then it's also sort of a question for like you guys in the office to be like, how do we get someone here to actually take care of this?
Yeah. This is consistent feedback over a couple of years now that engineering is an enormous need that's not being met. One response to that, we partnered with 2 neighboring districts and applied to the National Association of Conservation Districts for some additional funding to support the conservation funding process. Some of that went to hire an engineer. They're based out of the Rutland office, but they do cover Windham County. They just started a couple months ago and they're still getting their feet under them, but so there was an attempt to make that better, but it's a drop in the bucket.
We did also see 2 new engineers get hired on the state staff, though there's a new one out of Rutland again. But that still is the issue of there's a lot of stuff in Rutland and White River Junction and nothing in Brattleboro.
Right.
And we're also facing that issue with the forestry local fund pool of our forestry staff changes so rapidly that we're having trouble keeping up with that, but I can also talk about that.
Something we'll want to think about, that NACD grant, assuming it continues, we'll be reapplying each year. We could look to put an engineer in the Brattleboro office if we thought there was sufficient need.
Yeah, NRCS had like a part-time temporary engineer down in Brattleboro.
Either kind of the boss, or the boss, yeah.
Bill? You talking about Bill
Yeah.
Van Fossen?
Yes.
Oh, no, he's always been in Whitehaven. No, there's somebody else down. I mean, this is like 2010, 2011, whatever, but is that something that can be requested, or I don't know how it?
It's been requested frequently, but I mean, I'm sure the requested again.
I guess the question I would have for either Emma or Olivia is, what are the impediments to getting more engineers? Like NRCS knows they need more engineers. Are there simply not engineers out there? Or did the jobs not pay well enough to attract qualified applicants?
Or NRCS won't hire anyone,
Yeah.
but maybe they hire a temporary, but they don't have to pay benefits to. Which is problematic, but that's how they operate, right?
Do any of our local or regional partners have this, with Aaron's organization, Trout, or what is she?
Trout Unlimited.
Trout and CRC, do they have engineers or?
I assume they contract out their engineering just like we do. So when we're doing a project
Yeah.
that's not through NRCS, very specific conduit of work, if we're doing a project, we contract out with the engineering firm.
Okay.
So
And there's regional engineers?
there are private companies that do this work.
Yeah.
Yep. NRCS doesn't work with them. Basically, they have to be fully in the NRCS like system.
We can accept outside engineering plans. They do have to meet NRCS standards and specifications. The only issue is that when NRCS plans something that's free due to taxpayer dollars, but whenever you contract out, the landowner has to pay for that. Though supposedly there are NRCS technical assistance funding available for engineers, I have never seen that happen. I don't know if Olivia can speak more to that, or if that's also something else she's heard of, but that's not a big city happening.
So there, if you would need to, we can request what they're called 900 funds. That would be within our budget. The engineering staff would like place engineering funds aside so that a third party engineer could be hired. The thing is we don't really have a large budget for that because we have to place it aside. to plan for the engineering need. We did hire 2 engineers, so we have Elka Ox, and then a new engineer is going to be starting on Tuesday. So that will be another NRCS engineer. So getting those trained up so that they can be utilized more in Windham is the biggest need. But the hard part about sometimes going with a third-party engineer is the engineers still need to review the designs to make sure they're up to the standards and specs. And sometimes it's a little bit challenging to make sure that we're meeting those standards. And then it has to be redesigned anyway. So we've been having a little bit of trouble. So we try and keep it a little bit more in-house for projects.
The other issue with the 900 funds is I've heard it mentioned that the Windham, like what we're asking for that needs engineering isn't a high priority. So I just doubt unless it's a manure storage pit that's hundreds of thousands, they're not going to prioritize what we have in Windham County, which is usually smaller outside of the, I don't know, 5 maybe large dairies that fill this 5 to 10.
Yes. And honestly, we would have to make sure that that's in our budget early on. And I don't know if that's going to be something within the fiscal year, because just checking in with Bob last year, it wasn't a thing. So I think we have to, as a agency, have to plan for those things long term. And we would have to get with the engineering team to see like what the priorities are and the needs are for Windham County, which you're identifying today, and we can utilize this kind of stuff. But yeah, we would have to bring that up to them to see what their thoughts are.
I'm making the assumption that the local funding pool can't be used for that. For like engineering.
That's a good question. I don't know if we've ever gotten asked that, but that would be something good to look into. I don't know if that's been done before, but I'll write that down.
Thanks, Libby. All right. Okay, we also asked, what is the biggest threat to your land or your business? Same deal here with the bigger blocks represent more responses. So the largest, and we tried to categorize these by like areas of concern. So the biggest area of concern is climate change, not surprisingly. A lot of folks, 25 people responded invasive plants, insects, and animals. 20 responded water from extreme rain. 17 just responded climate change in general. And then 5 responded drought. It feels like we're working on a drought right now, right? Yeah. Among human concerns, development. Not 100% sure what folks meant by development. I assume that is like a threat to agricultural land conversion.
Forests.
Sure. Yep. Financial concerns, taxes / government, succession planning or land succession, access to employees is a consistent theme we've been hearing recently, and an uninformed community. I got one response. And then another block is environmental concerns, erosion, pollution, deer, increasingly a challenge to our forest lands. Somebody responded beavers. I'm looking at Patty.
Rats.
Yes, right. And then other odds and ends, limited by Act 250, preventing a culvert from being fixed, commercial businesses in rural area, closing a trail, pesticide and insecticide, lack of viability due to insufficient pasture, straightening and armoring in river corridors, impacts to fisheries and aquatic habitats, and fossil fuel consumption.
Well, Corey, just on the deer too, that someone said forestry, but I believe that's an increasing concern for veggie
Okay.
growers and
That makes
small
sense.
crops. It's come up, other places I've been. I can't think just where. I know at the national level, even there's talk about having a resolution about being able to, I think that NRCS cost share versus this kind of fencing, which you need to keep deer out and stuff. There's issues around that, that people are wanting to address. So it's not, yeah.
Our farm goes with it, like pretty heavy deer pressure, and it doesn't matter how much fencing you put, it's stacked. In fact, that's like, it's pretty effective.
Is that kind of exclusion fencing an NRCS practice?
It is currently for some things, but it's specifically for tree regeneration and forest lands. And the fence that's required to be built is above and beyond what any producer would be willing to spend the money on, because it has to meet a certain quality.
Right.
We did have an attempt to go around and use it as a pest control, as a 595 pest management system. But then had to do a closer dive on policy, and it specifically states that we're not allowed to use 595 for deer prevention, which means we circle back to no, we do not certify deer fencing currently for veggie operations as a pest management system. The other thing that they are trying for, that the goal I believe that I know of, is that they want to try to get a temporary fencing system that they can pay for deer management. So more of the two multi-dimensional fencing to like psych the deer out, and that would be of a like lower quality but still worthwhile taxpayer dollars to protect our forests.
How much? Yes, so sure. How much are people in Windham County experimenting with the double psych out fences?
Everybody, I feel like, that has a veggie operation that I go to has some sort of fencing, something they either like or hate. And I'm not like 3rd to 12th generation of that fencing.
But
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Are people finding it effective?
Yeah. And I don't know, Sam, do you use some sort of double?
I mean, like, almost sort of by accident, just because we're like trying to like, try to put it all together as we go. But certainly we have like an outer barrier and a sort of an electric fence, and then we have an inner barrier, and that's like a double stacked fence, and it's mostly effective if we get the whole thing put together.
Yeah.
But right now it's a little bit not all put together.
And really hot. I like whenever you go out to, there's at least a couple of veggie operations that you go out and you can hear the fences really aggressively, and you're like, yeah. They really don't want those deer.
We also asked for new or emerging trends in natural resources. There's a wide range of answers. Human migration due to climate change, impact of roadways on wildlife populations, water conservation, educating newcomers and climate refugees about the benefits of supporting rural landscapes, harvesting the water power in streams and rivers without damming. I know exactly what they mean, micro hydro generators. Okay. That's something we heard from out last year at the Conservation Conference Chat. Focus on building permits for grouped intensive housing projects. Obviously, housing is an enormous concern. Protect our wetlands and wildlife corridors. If we want a healthy mosquito population that doesn't carry disease, then strapped in trying to kill off every last one of them. Mapping invasive species, especially along stream banks. Small town staff assistance. You guys know more about that. Some of these can be addressed via legislation, and some via assistance to individual landowners. Airborne pesticide use affecting pollinators, supporting certified organic farms and organic practices on farms. Pollinators need habitats if they are to survive. Post-flood remediation, channelization of rivers. Residents in West Brattleboro are terrified by older trees, and they are cutting down perfectly healthy trees at an alarming rate, destabilizing other tree stands as well as their own land. Oh, anybody know anything about that?
How interesting. I don't know if you're speaking to, I don't know about older trees, but I know I have land out in West Meeting this year. I talked about here, applying for NRCD or something. With hemlock woody intelligent or emerald ash borer, definitely some folks have tried to get ahead of that, or have been of the mindset like, take all the hemlock out now before it has no value anymore. And that could be speaking to something like that.
So it's perception rather than understanding.
Well, and some of those markets are really high, like the ash market is extremely high. So people want to cut their ash while the prices are high because
Want to cash in.
yeah, ash is dead. in the Midwest, and now they're,
I mean, we're seeing like multiple ash trees every year dying off, like we're losing a lot of ash just on our 5 acres.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can see all the blonding, which is, yeah.
Other responses, we need to protect open land and Vermont's character. We're going to need state strategies to protect Vermont from changes to federal and international environmental protections. The need for collaborative conservation projects, support for regenerative agriculture and local regional food hubs, support research into treatment of invasive jumping worms. So pretty wide range of answers there. Okay, before we go into the results of last year's fund pool, I'm gonna turn it over to Marie to talk a little bit about the basin plans, which are really our most thorough planning documents that we have for Windham County. I will stop share so you can share.
It's Marie could take over if you wanted to.
No, you can do it. There we go. So, you know what? I hate having my, trying to talk people to my back. Just do this. So what I did was just put together some maps about the basin, the two basins that are in Windham County. Just some folks are very familiar with this and some are not. So what I do is create these tactical basin plans, which look at the water quality and habitat issues in our rivers, lakes, streams, and ponds. So that's what this is about. It's a, you know, it's a similar thing. Where are there problems? Where's there good stuff? And what do we need to do about them? So the two plans that cover parts of Windham County are Basin 11, which is the West Williams Saxtons. This is the Williams River. This is the Saxtons River. All of this is parts of the West River coming down into Bratt. And then there are a number of smaller brooks like Sackett's Brook, East Putney Brook, that all drain directly to the Connecticut. So this plan covers this region. The other plan is the Deerfield River Plan, which covers things like the Whetstone Brook here, Broad Brook, the Deerfield coming down this way. This is the Green River. The Deerfield is a bi-state watershed, so about half in Vermont, half in Massachusetts. So the north branch of the Deerfield, you know, I'll go through them more closely, but so these are this is the region we're covering. You can't say 18 towns in this and like 24 towns in the West Basin. So what we're looking at is what's going on in the landscape, what's happening, and how much of it is impacting water quality and habitat throughout. So in the West River Basin, it's, you know, both of these basins are really great because they're 80+% forested, which is our most protective land cover for water quality. You know, it keeps water clean. In the West, the developed land, as you can see in the red on the left, Brattleboro, Stratton, Rockingham, kind of those three areas are red, little scattered bits in Chester and stuff like that. But for the most part, we have, you know, very limited concentrated developed areas. The one in the upper right is the ag land, which you really can't see very well in colors on that map. But, you know, we can also look at where the ag is happening and where that relates to water quality concerns. The protected forests is, again, in both watersheds is impressive because we've got Green Mountain National Forest that covers big chunks of the watersheds. There's a number of state and federal other lands, town forests, and it also includes UVA, current use lands, because that is a form of forest protection, right? It keeps that forest in forest and keeps that forest covered. So Basin 11 looks good kind of in all of those. I highlighted this
because this is both basins in the rare, threatened and endangered. You know, all those different colors are some form of rare, threatened, endangered species. The purple is natural, important natural communities. And I boxed out basically the Connecticut River Valley, because there is a really high concentration of RTE species, Herrick's Cove, Retreat Meadows, you know, the Connecticut River itself. And the Connecticut River is a major corridor for animal movement, wildlife, predicted wildlife migration coming up from the mid-Atlantic states through Massachusetts into southern Vermont and crossing the Connecticut into New Hampshire up towards the Maritimes. So this big migration route. And there's a lot of them here that start here. We are at southern Vermont is at the northern edge of a lot of southern territories or territory ranges for animals and plants. Yeah, so there's a lot going on. And yeah, and those are the ones who will probably see migrating first from here. So I just wanted to point that out as a resource, be aware of that as a resource concern. The protected priorities are rivers and streams that we know are in really good shape. And how do we go about keeping them that way? Mitigating the land use impacts that are happening and potentially threatening those. So it's a complicated map, but you know, if there's issues, we can come back to this and look at these. That's why I'm pointing them out. And the lower map is the not so good stuff, right? We do have water quality concerns here. If you look at the upper map, you know, there's long stretches with tributaries sticking out of them. The lower map is little dots. That's a good thing. You know, we have really good water quality down here for the most part. We do have issues and concerns in specific locations. Overall, we're in good shape. Pretty much the same thing with the Deerfield. Again, the concentrations of population and development, Brattleboro, West Brat, Mount Snow, Wilmington, Dover, you know, where there's a lot of ski area development. Other than that, we got lots of green. And in this basin, we have also, there's twice as much water and wetland in the Deerfield watershed as there is in the West River watershed. Because it's got those massive reservoirs. And there's a crazy amount of wetlands in the upper Deerfield watershed. All that light green up to the left there. Yeah. Lots of wetlands. So that's a great thing. Again, the ag map is down the bottom, and if you have a chance, when I'll give this to Corey and he can send it out. When you zoom in on that, it's the major river valleys, right? The Connecticut River, the Deerfield River Valley, where there's a lot. The East Branch of the North River, which is this one down here, and Whetstone. You know, there's a lot of ag along those limited flat areas that we have around here. So those are, you know, all there, and they're in our river valleys, so we do need to treat them gently. Again, the upper right is the forest cover, and this basin has a huge amount of forest cover because so much Greenmount National Forest, so much land that belongs to the hydro company that they reserve so they can flood it when they need to. So there's a lot of forest cover in this basin. So in that way, both of these basins in Windham County are really good.
Just curious, in terms of forest cover, are we factoring in maple producers as well?
Yeah. Yeah, as long
In
as,
terms of the inherent value of conserving?
yes, definitely.
Yeah, because we have a lot.
Yeah, and it keeps it in forest cover and it's preserved that way. It's great.
Marie, all those wetlands on the left side of the map, are those largely in the Green Mountain National Forest? Or are they in some?
Yeah, pretty
conserved?
much all of this part of the Deerfield watershed is majority Green Mountain National Forest. Yeah, you can see it on this map, kind of pretty much all of that is, the majority of it is the forest, so it's great. Nice clean water. Upper left, again, is that the good stuff and where the good stuff is and where we want to keep it good stuff. this one is just broken out in rivers and lakes, so again, very limited impaired waters or bad water quality in this basin. It's very, again, it's also in the North Branch of the Deerfield, where both Snow and Haystack or Hermitage now are, and lots of development there. So the lower one that says TMDL are the lakes. We have a lot of those lakes, impaired lakes here. Nobody's fault, at least nobody's local whose fault. We are in the airflow pattern from the Midwest that dumps all the pollution from the power plants onto us down in the southern part of Vermont, and that we get all their acid rain and and that's what those impairments are. Almost exclusively, they are acid mercury impaired lakes. And yeah, we just happen to be in the wrong place on the landscape for that particular feature. It comes over and it dumps on us. So our lakes are very acid. Since the air quality controls of the 80s and 90s have improved, our lakes are improving. So it's getting better, but it's just this long-term thing that we're going to deal with for a long time. Nothing we can really do about it. What this leads to, and from community meetings like this and the districts and all our other partners, we put together a massive list of things to do. And this is just the highlights from my executive summary on what we need to do in the basin. All of these projects, some of them are broad, like address sediment, nutrients, and temperature in the whole basin, because those are impacting our water quality. To very specific, take out the Blake Higgins Dam, which we did last summer. Wahoo! So that's on the Saxtons River. Somebody said they were from the Saxtons. So there are hundreds, literally hundreds of projects in both of these basins in our database. So you can look online. We have something called the Project Explorer in the ANR website. And if you look at that, there's a little water droplet every place we have a project. And if you click on it, it'll tell you what that project is. And if it's on your land, let us know. We'd love to talk to you. So, you know, there's all these kind of projects. There's lots in the West. There's lots in the Deerfield. I just highlighted the ag and the natural resources. So we also cover wastewater and stormwater, developed lands, road issues, all those other breakdowns. So there's lots of information out there. And, you know, in our discussion here today, if anything comes up and you want to look back at one of these maps, I'll just pull them back up. So if there are any questions on this.
I'm just struck, thank you so much. It's really super helpful. I'm glad you were able to come today. The two things that just really struck me was in terms of going our future and what our future might look at like as a country in terms of climate migration and what have you. Our water quality here is important not only for us who live here, but for this entire region, both for human habitation and for agricultural production to the south of us.
Absolutely. You know, the Green River.
Yeah.
In particular, we're working towards reclassifying the upper Green River to a high quality water. When we have different classes of water, I'm not going to go into detail here, but we're trying to increase the classification of the Green River because as soon as it hits the mass border, it's drinking water for green people.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So we want to make sure we're protecting our resources for our neighbors.
Because they're growing our food.
And they are. We're growing theirs, they're growing ours, we're sharing water. Connecticut River is the same way. There are a lot of people who drink the Connecticut River.
Yeah.
And we don't, necessarily think about that and go, oh, is that a good idea? But a lot of people drink water out of the Connecticut River.
Is, Marie, what you were saying about increasing the class or classification of it, does that bring with it certain
Protection.
protections.
Yeah.
Okay, so you
So-
can't do certain things if you. if it's a
Yeah,
higher class.
it doesn't stop you from doing something, it requires you to do it in a way that will protect the water quality. So like for Act 250, it doesn't mean you can't have a development there, you just have to do it, right? So it doesn't impact that.
The other thought I had was with our acidity level and the heavy metals and stuff in our lakes,
Yeah,
just how critically important it is for us to continue that monitoring. Because if we're looking at EPA rollbacks, if we're looking at, older generation power production being, encouraged by future
Yeah.
administrations, then like, and then if we tie those two things together,
right.
then we have powerful arguments at a federal level, at a national level, and what our state can do
And
to protect and affect change.
And all of those things currently limit people who subsistence fish, right?
Right.
People depend on our lakes and rivers for food,
Right.
and we don't often acknowledge that. But it is out there and people are using that, and we have very clear, don't eat more than one fish per week if you're of childbearing years, you know, that kind of stuff. It's serious. And we want that to improve over time, not reverse. I will stop sharing.
So thank you, Marie. It's worth mentioning, we focus most of our energy here on like the local fund pools and feedback to NRCS about existing programming. There's also the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, or CPP, which at present has large sums of money in it. And an organization, a partner, can apply into that to say we have a special project or a special suite of projects we want to do. Some of the types of things that you raise in that basin plan that like wouldn't be easily addressed through kind of the existing programs are something we could choose to build a program around. Our CPP is a really big undertaking. The Department of Environmental Conservation has their own right now. It's 10.1 million. It's focused on water quality from farms, basically. So well, I guess what I want to mention is when Travis Thomason has talked about that his dream for this local led process is that these local fund pools could be mini RCPPs or like RCPP pilots. So like you'd say like, oh, you know, culverts are a huge challenge in our watershed. So let's get a little mini one and try to do a few culvert replacements or upgrades. And then if it goes well, and we figure out we have capacities and organization to get the money out the door effectively, then we come back and say, all right, now we want millions of dollars. And his hope is that NRCS will be able to screen applicants through that process. So just something to think about as this continues to build from year to year. Yeah. I don't think we as a district want to run after an RCPP this moment. We have enough on our plate. Okay, a quick overview of last year's fund pools. We ended up submitting 2 fund pool proposals. There we go. They were, just as based on the feedback of this group and the resource concern survey. One was a forestry fund pool, supporting forest and associated agricultural land by addressing pest pressure, terrestrial habitat concerns, field sediment, nutrient pathogen loss, concentrated erosion, and degraded plant conditions. And we were awarded $400,000 in that fund pool. And then the second one was sort of, we've done that now 3 years in a row. We focused on forestry because we know it's a major priority. The new one this year was community scale agriculture to support crop, pasture, farmstead, and associated agricultural land by addressing soil quality limitations, degraded plant condition, wind and water erosion, pest pressure, storage, and handling of pollutants. And that one had $250,000 in it. Yes.
Did you spend it?
Well, that's the next thing we're going to talk about. So I guess, Emma, could you talk about the timeline a little bit? Because that's where I get confused.
So the timeline right now is that we haven't ranked applications in these pools yet, because that's still up. So the answer is no, we haven't spent it, but we also haven't finished the application, like the first official step in that. We do have.
Question, has the money been, have checks been written and deposited, or is the money still being, where's the actual money?
we haven't reached our ranking deadline yet, so the money is still sitting.
Are we approved?
Like, this was approved to be spent, but the applications just haven't been ranked yet. So like we have applications in the pot for it. One of the challenges where it makes it hard to pull information like how many applications do we have in this fund pool? It's not quite as easy as that because we can put applications in a variety of fund pools. So having this one increases the probability of our participants getting chosen for funding when they address these resource concerns. But they could be put in several ranking tools to increase their probability of being funded. Based off of last year though, we had roughly $7,000 and a total of about $185,000 that was spent on these small farm operations. We do have several deferred applications from 2024 as well for high tunnels and other small operation, diversified ag operations that weren't funded, and we had at least 6 new small farm applications that should be eligible for this fund pool. And forestry, we also still have additional deferred, up to 16 deferred applications from last year, and roughly 8 new applications that we've been able to get the planning completed on that should be eligible for that fund pool. And those are the numbers that I have. If Olivia has any more, she's welcome to throw some out. But did I answer the question? Or do you have any more?
I guess the question is, based on your understanding of the landscape currently, does it seem like it was enough money, too much money, not enough money?
Based on the landscape currently, I feel like it was enough money. It would have been pivotal if we could have gotten another forester on staff to help with the forestry ranking pool specifically. We just didn't have the
So
capacity.
the issue might not be a lack of need on the ground, it might be a lack of capacity.
Yes.
Okay.
Because we have a year and a half roughly of forestry applications that the planning needs to be completed on. So we definitely have the on the ground need, just the lack of capacity. I've requested forester be hired into our office. We do currently have one that's supposed to be hired for the southern region as a National Wildlife Federation forester, but that's still going through the process. That's a historic forester that has been, or a position that has been in this area, but it's usually like a fostering ground for an NRCS employee, so they move through real fast. Which is what happened with Spencer, our last forester. He's now an NRCS forester in more of the central zones, who's not handling our workload. So right now we just have Sean Rabbit, who is an NRCS forester out of the White River Junction office. And Tyler Brown is a state forester who does work for us, but he can't do the invasive work management as much. He has to have a forestry focused forest that he's looking at, or a wildlife focused forestry application that he's looking at because of his demand on his program.
How about the small scale, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
How about the small scale pool? That's new this year, so I'm curious.
Yeah, that's new this year. I don't have a lot to say about it because I also haven't gotten to the ranking point yet either. However, I think that the funds feel adequate right now based off of what I have pulled out. Yeah, one of the challenges that we will have in the next couple of years with the IRA money that we have, so the Inflation Reduction Act money, is we have so much money available that I believe the limiting factor, and this is my personal opinion, I guess, is that the NRCS staffing capabilities is going to be the greatest limiting factor to who gets funded. And that's just how it is.
And that's my question is, as we consider these different pots, would it make more sense to have more than a couple of pots that are smaller that will not be necessarily limited by capacity? Really, if you spread out the topics, basically in the meetings, would that make them more likely to get through sooner? If there's no capacity in forestry, what, if it doesn't make sense to put 400 in there or.
Okay. Whether the money should be reviewed or I would have to double check, but I'm fairly certain the forestry fund can be spent. I think if we did these again in similar quantities, I think that can be spent. The small scale farm is a lot easier for us to do because it doesn't require a forester. I just know that I'm not skilled, nor do I feel comfortable going out and assessing which trees to cut. Because I'm not a forest. So that's where that expertise is needed, where going to a small scale operation, we need other crops, no talents.
Like, the NRCD through the forestry local fund, well, you can use outside consulting foresters, they just have to. NRCS. So like, we're doing that, Longview, is, they're foresters on staff. Yeah, exactly. They can work forest management plan for the NRCS. So there are like TFP outside of that, okay.
The NRCS forester will still end up going out and verifying that those practices that the state ones do are correct.
Lucia has repeatedly online. You can go ahead, Lucia.
I didn't know Lexi was here.
She might not have heard you,
Okay, well.
Oh.
Lucia, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize for my tardiness, although Olivia did forward this to me. I wasn't quite in the mix, but I'm glad that I'm available to join you. Um, as it relates to what Emma was saying, we are working on our workload capacity. That is something that we recognize. She spoke about National Wild Turkey Federation and our NRCS foresters. So that's also something that's in the work for to help address those things as it relates to the capacity, in addition to moving toward the realignment that'll go from 4 zones to 7 teams, with the hopes that that will help to better distribute workload, stress levels, administrative things, all of the things, which will definitely take time, right? But I also want to ask that, Marie, if you could repeat your question. I couldn't quite hear what you were asking. I heard something about funding and smaller pools or something like that. Could you repeat your question?
Sure. I was just wondering if if there's limited staff that can address one particular type of set of practices in these funding pools. Like, we've got 400 in the forestry one. Would it make sense to have 3 funding pools with a little less in there if the capacity on NRCS's end is limited? Would it make sense to spread it out to get these projects moving through without them getting backed up to next year and stuff like that? Would it make sense to try to match capacity better, I guess, is the question.
Okay, if I'm understanding, you're asking if, say, for instance, we talk about 400,000, right? And you're saying, what if we split those up to 4 $100,000 pools? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, if we put 200 into forestry and 200 into small scale and another couple of hundred into climate change practices, does NRCS have the capacity to deal with those more limited numbers?
So I really don't think it's the limited numbers. The money is already there, right? I don't
Yeah.
think it's more so of the fund pools and how they're distributed and those kinds of things. It's more of we've got the applications already on the books, right? It's already here. So whether we do it in one fund pool or multiple fund pools, they would still get ranked within those areas, and we'd still have the same amount of workload essentially that still would need to get addressed. Does that make sense? Does that answer?
Emma was saying that that there was a lack of ability to get the forestry money out the door, maybe because of not having foresters that work at NRCS that have the capacity. I think the question is, if the money was in a different pot, would it be able to get out the door? Because it wouldn't be the forester, which we have a shortage of.
I think this is like really similar to what I was saying earlier about the, not having a water engineer, is like, we as a group, maybe have to decide if we want to ever put funding towards.
I'm
something
sorry, I
that's-
can't hear what's being, could you speak a little bit louder?
Sorry, Felicia. Earlier in the meeting, I was sort of talking about like a lack of capacity or lack of staffing for certain things. So I was talking about a water engineer. So I was like, we have to sort of decide as a group if we ever want to put funding in a pool towards a lot of water quality stuff if there are no engineers that are available at all. And so I think this is like a similar question, is like if there are not like adequate amount of foresters to deal with it, then do we want to put that much money towards forestry when there isn't enough like workforce to like put the
I
applications
see.
are there. Yeah, the applications are there and that's great, but if the applications are gonna be pending for years in the future, when we could decide to prioritize something that could actually get done on the ground faster, I think that's the question, is like, do we want to prioritize projects getting done? Or do we want to prioritize, like, this is really important to people, but we could be waiting years to see the fruits of the labor?
Perfect.
Got it. Nope. Yep. I appreciate that. Thank you for that clarification, as I do recognize I came in a little late. So I'm getting bits and pieces. Thank you for that clarification. Totally get it now. I do understand that thought process and that question. I think that's also a question that comes from you all in this space, right? That's one thing that you listening to the voices of the folks in the community, getting the feedback of what's actually happening in the system works and on the ground from NRCS, and then saying this is where we think we should prioritize based on that information. I think that's not something that we can, make that decision for you. But what you're hearing as your work group, as well as from others, the idea though over time is that we are able to get the capacity that we need in order to address it. It probably won't ever be perfect, right? But that's also why we collaborate with partners, while we, get National Wild Turkey Federation, other foresters, in order to reduce some of the widespread workload where people are stretched thin, to kind of hone in on, okay, now I can focus on these key areas and now I have a better capacity. And I think that is the goal we're trying to reach. And I think it's just going to take us a little bit of time to get there. And I think that we will get there based on the efforts there. But as immediate reaction or response to that, yeah, I don't know that would be the a decision that I can say we're making. That it would just really be what you all think an approach or strategy could be for you.
Could I just add to that, like if we go that route, we should make it clear, like it does become an equity issue for Southern Vermont, for Windham County in particular. It's been historically kind of underfunded, underserved. I used to work for the Farm Service Agency and dealt with like FSA and NRCS regularly. But so if we go the route of deciding we're not going to put money into fund pools, even though there's a demonstrated need and people on the ground in the county want and need these practices, but can't have them because of NRCS capacity issues, then we should make that clear. Like that should be documented, and it should be a request to NRCS to up its game and provide that capacity where it's needed and asked for. I would just add that.
To follow up on that.
I appreciate you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
A similar thing that I'm actually gonna say was I knee jerk, I'm like, well, yeah, we should just like make a third pool and take a little bit out of something that can't be done so that we can get stuff done. But my concern is then if they see a back off of requests for that, do we ever get another forester? Do we ever get a water like engineer? Maybe those things actually literally never come because they don't see a demonstrated need, because there's not like a 6-year backlog. So maybe we do have to be the squeaky wheel in order to get that. So I guess like, I know I'm sort of like devil's advocating my own first question in the beginning. So But I guess like that's the question is, right, maybe we state it, we're like, look, we can't even fund this stuff anymore because year after year after year, we don't have the capacity to fund it. So that's why we've deliberately gone and not followed what people said they needed because we can't get it funded. Maybe that's how we squeaky wheel instead. I think that's like a terrific suggestion, is just to be really loud and obnoxious about why we didn't fund things that actually needed funding. Like maybe that's a good way to like get things done and squeaky wheel. I think it's like such that maybe that's like such an elegant and obnoxious way to do that, right? I mean, that's like really threading the needle.
I think there's another point here, which was made at the December meeting, and I think that Marie made it as well, that this is a corridor for migration, and Windham County Conservation District is a protected entity to ensure that invasives, then we need to maintain the integrity of the environment that exists here. And so if these things need to be funded in order to maintain that integrity, then I don't see it as a choice. I see it as gentle, persistent insistence on building the capacity that's necessary.
Can I add another? Oh, is there another response? Sorry.
Go ahead, Felixia.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think you all make great points, and I think I'm not sure of who spoke just earlier about like the equity piece, but that was kind of what I was getting at when we talk about this is a decision from the voices of the people that you're representing, right? That's a decision from the group based on what you're hearing, and I do think that that has to be taken into consideration as it relates to the applications and providing that. I don't think that we'll see a reduction in that because it is a need, right? It's continuously, and we've continued to see it as a need, which is why we are working to build that capacity, right? Now, within this role that I serve in right now, there is a limit to what I can do and what I can't do, right? And being able to provide that information to justify the additional support that we need within the space, within this space. Yes, it is there. Yes, it is something that, you know, is being shared and saying, okay, this is where we need. But there's also, you know, those higher level things that we have to provide information to and limitations as far as the budget is concerned. And we'll continue to work within the reins and what's provided to me in order to make that happen for the capacity. As Emma said, and the National Wild Turkey Federation is one effort to do that. To, you know, even if we can't do it over here, maybe we utilize a partner to help us, you know, service that within the where we have the gaps in that capacity. So that's where we just continue to work through in the interim until we can solidify to say this is we can add another additional support person to fill that role into that goal. And as I said, it's a work in process, working with our team, realignment, the structure, and identifying here's adequate documentation to say this is where the workload, this is where the need is. And that is also where you all come in to help support that documentation so that we can continue to build that up to say this is where we need a need to fill the gaps in. So I really appreciate all the good feedback and notes that are being said here in regards to that. Continue to be the squeaky wheel because that also helps me do my job. So thank you.
Thanks, Lexi. Emma?
As a side note with the statement of division versus lumping, last year they did make these fund pools very broad in the practices that we allow. So unless you had a different priority that you were going to focus on, as one of the people who has to utilize the fund pool in our system, they've been very functional, and I don't know that dividing out, unless you were trying to make a point about priority, that it would change their efficacy on my end. But like if you had a water quality one that you just wanted colder to fund to show that there was that evenness like that's kind of a different topic, but as far as the diversity, ability for this to serve the people based off of the things that were noted last year, I feel like these are a good representation. Thanks.
It's not a fun thought, but the Inflation Reduction Act money is not guaranteed. In fact, the government, the continuing resolution the government's operating under right now does not include it, is my understanding. And then we'll find out in, I think, March, what happens. I guess my question is, if the IRA money were to go away on us, I'm assuming the needs would look very different when it comes to funding things, because a lot of stuff's getting funded that way right now, right?
I have a general concern about that too. The new administration, it shifts its priorities. I mean, notwithstanding Congress and its enabling legislation for funding. But funding cycles are weird because like, you pass this legislation this year, it's not for several years that the money gets spent. But having money clawed back or having money just fall off a cliff, like those are real dangers. I mean, I think as a state, we're experiencing that right now, where someone's like, oh, there's a big precipice. What's going on? Just as a thing to be thinking about as we plan and try to think about it.
Ooh, based on like what I've heard Travis Thomason say, I think he feels like he's really committed to this model of putting money at the local level, even if there's a lot less money to go around.
Yeah.
And so that's where I wonder if we should be at all thinking about what happens if the IRA money all goes away and this becomes much more competitive. This is not just some extra special thing, but maybe it's the chunk of funding that's available to the kind of producers. Do we need to consider that?
Wait, question, is that, funding for FY 25 or?
This is for FY 26. Yeah.
No, but the money that was allocated through the IRA, say for last year for 24 and 25, that money is. Like, can that be pulled or not, because it's been sort of, it's already been passed down?
My understanding, if there are signed agreements,
That
the
can't,
money cannot be pulled. I mean, anything.
it means signing the manual.
Or just sign.
This time.
No, like if the district, for instance, has an RCPP, I hate those, but anyway, agreement signed through the DEC RCPP, if the district has an agreement signed, that money cannot be pulled back.
Fund pool
Is
is-
signed.
Okay.
Funding pools through NRCS, the ones that Emma's talking about, that they have the applications. It's my understanding that money is already obligated. Lacey, I'm sure could speak to that more clearly, but,
Yeah, that's my question. The current applications is that.
For contracts that are already obligated, that money is there. For those that are not, we won't know until we know, essentially. But to answer your question, Corey, yes, the commitment to this model is still there regardless of whether we have the IRA funding or not.
And this distribution does, in my opinion, reflect what I've seen on the ground in the field office of what is being funded. Outside of a couple of like the larger operation, manure storages, I feel like most of the contracts we funded have fallen under these concepts, even if not through this funding. If that makes sense.
Actually,
Correct.
I was gonna say
Correct.
about the potential reduction in funding, and our thought process towards that. We can't ever control how much money is ever gonna come towards us, but I guess that like the change that we made last year, that like was personally like my drum to beat forever, was like having a separate fund that was towards the small scale landowners, like, because you just can't get access to any programming if you have less than 25 acres or something, it seems like that. And so like being able to split it, like if things are gonna get even more competitive, because there's less and less and less money, the only thing that we can really control is how we separate these fund pools to increase equity, and separating the fund pools to have a small scale specific is what increases equity for folks. So I feel like that's what we have to think about as a group, if we're like splitting fund pools or whatever, and we're thinking about a reduction in funding and an increase in competition, then like how do we separate them so that we increase equity over who gets access to the money? And so like, I guess that's sort of like, that's my only piece about it, is that we made a huge step towards that last year. And I think like, if we're thinking about like scarcity, then like, that's something we should focus on, is increasing equity within that scarcity. And like that, so that's like, that's what I'm thinking.
And some of those things can be addressed through a fund pool that targets them. Others need changes to like how the whole system works.
Right,
Yes,
right.
which we can't do those ourselves. We could advocate for those.
Yeah, I mean, we could just beat that drum
Yes.
forever.
Well, and be smart about it, but also be smart about how we use the system.
Right.
And that's also the dual part of this, group, is that you are gonna just have other suggestions as well as the fund.
Yeah, we're gonna go to the state technical committee meeting in April and say, here's everything we learned, here's what we think we should do.
And that's definitely my recommendation in that state technical committee, meeting, is to have those notes, that documentation, to provide that additional support outside of your local fund pool recommendations.
Okay. I know we're kind of running out of time here, but I did want to share, for folks who weren't able to attend the conservation coffee chat in December, there was a pretty good broad discussion, and there was this brainstorming activity. I think it's easier if I go to this document, where we filled out this. Okay, so the first part was, what resource concerns are you facing? What obstacles are there to achieving your goals? I didn't share my screen, sorry.
I started to.
You did, okay. So resource concerns people raised at that are very similar to what we saw from the survey. Climate change, river, water bodies. There was discussion about need for business planning assistance, fossil fuel, or things related to climate change.
Our program can help with business planning.
Right. Yeah. A lot of questions about who the district is and what we can do, and doing more to get the word out about who we are. Concerns around forest and working lands, concerns around funding and related to that, farm viability and need for housing and affordable housing, concerns around invasives. And a major point that came up a lot was a need for better connection. So like farmers still isolated, and making sure that you have access to, whether it's agencies or nonprofits to help you, or just other farmers who can share know-how. And that we've talked about how the district could play a part in doing that. And then there was this question, dream up the most unattainable, extreme, and impractical solutions you can think of for a given problem, or dream up the most unattainable, extreme, and impractical farm operation, forest, landscape, home, etc. So kind of like, what's your dream? And there are fun thoughts in here. Some of it's like very specific, an individual person's dream. Others are, more systems-based, like have a stronger farm community where we help each other. Multi-generational living space surrounded a large greenhouse with aquaponics, somebody discussed. Completely change how Americans live and use the environment. Unrestricted funding, we all wish. Have a place to learn how to do sustainable living, learn how to work / manage a restaurant, multi-generational, permaculture farm. There was a lot of discussion around that, not enough help. We talked about working on organic farms.
Wearable farm, do it.
And then one idea that was brought up was like a county labor office. Could there be a central entity that hires employees to work on farms and handles all the HR and finance and all that? Farms just basically like contract when they need help. That's a big systems solution that wouldn't happen right away, but I just wanted to share those because there was a really good conversation about those items. Okay, in terms of our agenda. Okay. So I think we've reviewed all of the data we have. So I think the first really big question is, are there gaps in our knowledge? Are there things we wish we knew that we don't know? Do you want us at the district to go out and do more investigation? Do you want us to talk to more people or attend more meetings? Or do we think we know what we need to know?
You had asked in the beginning about how to potentially get the survey filled out by more farmers. And is there any chance to combine efforts with the Farm Bureau at their annual meeting and have that be a prerequisite for them to get a raffle ticket at blah, 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 if they fill out the survey?
When is that farm?
Like a good raffle.
When is the Farm Bureau annual meeting? Is that still to come?
I believe it's in the end of the year. I think it's in November.
So that would be for the next,
Franklin Farm is the new, or John Franklin is the new.
Yep, I knew that.
Okay.
which is great.
The state annual meeting at least used to always be the first part of November. I don't know about the
November
county.
I wonder if you can also partner with other organizations like Rural Vermont, when they have their annual meeting, or, like other organizations like that. Like, I don't mess with a lot of like government agencies, so this like big bureau meeting you're talking about, not a clue what that is. And I've been farming for like almost 15 years. I don't know who any of those people are. I don't mess with that. But I do mess with Rural Vermont. I do mess with Conservation District. I do mess with, you know what I mean? I go with like smaller organizations who are like advocacy organizations. So,
But you did answer the survey.
what's that?
You did answer the survey, so.
Yeah, cause
Yeah.
I like messing with the Conservation District,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? But for other farmers who are maybe not like messing around really with like FSA or like VFAM or whatever.
Does the rural development, or,
Rural Vermont.
yes, do they do an annual meeting of some sort?
Yes, they do.
They don't have a huge presence in Windham County. Like,
Yeah, so
Northern Vermont organization. but they're
last
trying to get
year,
around.
so they do a workshop at my farm every single year. And last year, not this year, but last year, they had their annual meeting in Williamsville.
Yeah.
I'm the squeaky wheel. So like, you know, again, like if you keep sort of like, if we all keep beating that drum, you know what I mean? And if we like increase, you know, if you're reaching out to them, then they're gonna feel like they wanna work down here more because they're gonna see that there's a presence here for it. So it's just like a thought, is like, are there other organizations that you could also, that are maybe not like state or federally run? Are there other advocacy organizations that you could be partnering with? So that you're getting more farmers under the umbrella. Cause I sort of like, as a farmer, like isolation is a big thing, but I also get the sense that there's sort of like, there's a club who does that stuff, and then there's all the rest of us over here who are just like scrounging around for scraps, you know what I mean? And so like, if you can sort of like find all of us scroungers, you're gonna get like a much wider pool, and you're also gonna get a much broader view. That's not so much like the same. All of us out here on the fringes have like fringy ideas, but they're like really good ideas. And so like, that's sort of like and I would like even add like, not just more farmers, but like the age for me, like I'm starting to get towards that age bracket, that is the higher age bracket, and I'm like, but where is everyone behind me? Like, I just know so many young farmers who are just like not plugged in, you know what I mean? And so like, how do we reach a lot more like young folks? So I like wonder if like advocacy organizations or more radical organizations might be a way to like get also more towards like the less retirement age folks.
And farm to table and food connects and that part of where the food is going, where the markets are. I think there are younger people in those areas too, not just younger.
There's the National Real Farmer Coalition, but the Vermont chapter has been quiet for, and it's the people who we're keeping it active. They're like active farming and busy, but
Sounds like some general outreach strategizing could be a separate topic at another.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yep. Especially for like the next time we go through this
Yes.
cycle to really make.
Yeah,
it
like a little
more
ahead
fast.
of time,
Yeah, yep. So to pivot back to that question, no, that's okay. Those are all really good thoughts. Are there things we feel like we need more information about, or do we feel good about?
I think the answer is yes. We want to see lower demographics and more farmers, right? Or did I?
No, he's talking about do we have enough to?
Do we have enough to make a decision about this year's fund pool proposals and conservation action plan? Or do we feel like we need to go on to more? And I guess the other question, just because we'll be writing a natural resources assessment out of the information sort of been presented here. Are there other planning documents we should look at? I was going to specifically at GeoMarie, because I know you know this stuff better than I do. You know, there's river corridor plans, there's stream geomorphic assessments. I don't know how much it's necessary to dig into that.
I don't think they're as applicable to this
Okay.
as the information that you're gathering.
Okay. One thought I just had that I don't want to think of sooner, the district's been working hard on this, working with agricultural producers to reduce nitrogen inputs to the Connecticut River. There is a broad survey effort that's been going on for almost a year. I think we should probably look at that data and glean out the stuff specifically about why they don't apply for help. Because there are some questions in there that are like, what are the impediments to getting help? And I think that might help us provide some evidence to why NRCS could make some changes. Would you agree, Isabel, that we can?
Well, we don't quite have that question, but
We have,
because it's not an RCS focus.
no, it's not. We have questions about like, why don't you do certain conservation practices? And there are choices like.
Yeah, I think we need the open survey. We need the sit at the table, have a discussion part to get that.
And that's what's
answer.
coming next, yeah.
Yeah, because
Okay.
I think right now we could say, well, people aren't applying for technical support because they don't have time. It's like, okay, well, that's
not that.
we can't solve their time issue, for them.
I'm guessing some might say they've tried in the past and then the technical assistance isn't there in a timely manner for what works for their farm, which is an ongoing issue. And no bad reflection on NRCS, it just seems to be the way of the system. It's technical assistance deficit has been an issue for a long time.
And from the written, like the fill in the blank responses, people had that and they didn't target just one group. It was all sorts of technical service providers cycling through and never seeing the same face, not having to re-explain the same narrative over and over. Common theme.
So with all that information and some really lively discussion, are there things not addressed in the two fund pools we did last year that need to be addressed?
Could you go back to the slide?
Yep.
The early slide that was the graph of what people thought they wanted to do?
Yep.
Yeah.
Irrigation's under the small ag.
And is that one of the, like, there isn't technical?
These were needs. And the next one was what they'll actually apply for. I don't know if it makes more sense to focus on what they're actually gonna apply for, because that's in the short time frame of the next fiscal year. That's where the money needs to be. Is this what you're referring
I think
to?
I've asked this before, but the access road is a forest, like a logging access road.
I believe,
No,
no?
No, it's ag fields, right?
yep, it's ag access, so like if you have a
Cattle
waste storage
access.
facility, it's getting a road built to the waste storage facility to dump manure. The forest trails and landings would be the forestry version of that.
Okay.
But the access road is not like cattle lanes like we have.
No, that was a big.
Oh, okay.
There are 3 different kinds of roads. You managed to find them all.
Are any of these top 8 something that's not in our current fund pools?
I think the only one that might not be is wetland wildlife habitat management. And that's something that is easily addable, most likely to the forestry one, I would think. Yeah. Yeah,
I would do that.
we,
Add that to my contract.
Everyone feel good about that?
I don't know how or if this applies, but I was up in Franklin County, like Grand Isle, and they have all this signage that says, here's the practice we're doing and here's what it's protecting. And,
We do that too.
oh, we do, okay.
No, it's a great
I
thing.
have clear signs in my garage, they somehow never got out.
That might be the issue.
Technical
Like that,
criticism.
and thought, what a tremendous opportunity that is to educate the public.
Yep.
And to show what's actually happening here, which creates relief when we see that
Yeah.
situations are being addressed. So I don't know how if that applies to this particular conversation. But it needs to be funded and the labor to get the sites up needs to be. So I mean,
So the district has a fair amount of funding from the State Agency of Agriculture to do outreach and education for producers, and that can include distributing those signs. Because one of the goals of that program is to basically advocate for all the great work farmers do as land stewards. I agree that educating the public is really important.
especially as a border state, in our position, just the recreators who come up from our beavers.
Yes, if they're on their way to Mount Snow and they drive by those signs.
But in the summer, they come up and they swim, they hike,
Yeah.
they bike, they, they do all kinds of other things. But yes, as well as
Yeah.
the skiers.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree, and I think those signs could be very helpful, in forestry situations too, like logging jobs. People will often see a logging site that's like messy, like brush and all of that stuff, but that is excellent habitat, as part of
Right.
the process of, a successional piece of land, forest.
Messy's usually great.
Messy,
Yes.
yeah, so
Maybe
that educational piece too, like if you want support for like sustainable forestry practices, you have to educate the public about what that actually looks like, because there is a very negative
Yeah.
perception of what.
Pastoral sensibility.
Yeah, and just like of what good forestry is, like, yeah, it's like proper logging and stuff, but messy forests are.
But is any of this gonna go into our this conversation?
Yeah, I don't
In the
know.
fund pool itself, no, in our report to SDC,
So we should,
yes.
but I love it. Yeah, no.
Marie,
I'm not totally familiar with what's in the small farm, what practices are in that. And I really like the idea of adding wetland stuff to it, and whether that's the wetland at the top or the wetland enhancement at the bottom, because those and a few other practices, I don't know if they can be added to it, are also climate mitigation strategies, right? Enhancing wetlands so that they absorb more of that flood water.
Are you proposing it in the small fund pool or the forestry one?
I don't know. I'm just saying, can,
It could, I see it being more practicable in the forestry one personally, because a lot of our small ag people honestly either don't have the land base for it to be relevant, or don't have the time to make it a thing that they're gonna prioritize.
can you explain what it is? Like what actually happens on the ground when somebody implements that practice?
I've never seen it done, however, I am gonna assume that it's gonna be just like planting wildlife habitats you say, okay, I found a wetland, we're gonna put 100-foot buffer around it to meet some requirement that's in our standards, and we're gonna do wetland plantings. I wish Emma Gregg was here, because I bet she could tell you about it, because she's ready to go to help anyone who has a wetland. Yeah.
because, I'm thinking prior converted hydric soil.
Yes,
and
exactly,
things
like
that.
those
So
would
that
be
would
what
fall
you
into
would
that.
be
Okay.
trying to enhance with that.
So I just want to highlight that Isabel's working on a few sites for wetland restoration. They're in the design phase. And so this is something where you maybe could funnel a project into a fund pool the following year.
But they are at land, so then they would have to be under small ag, and they're not all under
I
25.
had almost thought we expanded the forestry fund pool to include ag land specifically.
That's an
for this
associated
purpose.
ag land.
Oh, okay, yeah, and that's what it would probably, we would probably add it as associated, because it would no longer be armed at that point. And like, that's the justification utilized to get it funded. So we did try to make accommodations, but that was an issue that I faced in previous fund pools we had, where it was only forested land, we couldn't do brush management or invasives control on any land that was non-forested, which was not the goal of the fund. Yeah.
Great.
So, but thanks for bringing it up, because without that, 2 years ago, maybe we would have gotten better, but we're learning. All we can do.
Are there any practices that we included that we should not include next time? Anything like, wow, nobody did that, or NRCD simply couldn't implement that?
Can you see the thing again where it says, where it says 40,000 and 400,000 and 250,000, because that actually listed all of them? I think this is a little.
Yep.
Okay.
Those are the objectives, not the actual fact.
Right. I have that somewhere.
Right, so there was like high tunnels, the raised beds, irrigation.
I haven't found a reason. I think that this conversation is premature, honestly, because we haven't had time to make it. So like, I don't know if I've hit roadblocks sorry, any of us who take road blocks.
When is the ranking deadline?
The ranking deadline is February 7th of the year.
So we could revisit this before we have to finish this work. Okay.
And a question for you. And back to the wider thing, I'm thinking about amphibian biodiversity, salamander and frog crossings. Would that fit into terrestrial habitat? I mean, that's a question for the technical people, but like, do we need to worry about salamander and frog? Because we have a lot of road crossings where, I mean, we have the guards and stuff like that, and I saw somewhere somebody put some tunneling in at one point underneath roads that, you know, at key points. Is that something that
That'd be cool.
Beak could spend some money on?
I think we'd be talking about municipal properties at that point, and we're thinking about underpasses, or like it's on a farm road, but they don't get enough traffic.
Right.
Does that apply as an AOP? Are they aquatic organisms for the purposes of AOP passage?
They are when you're replacing a culvert and things like that, to enlarge the culvert enough so there's dry passage as well as wet passage areas through a culvert.
Now, these amphibians definitely will use culverts if they're in the right location, and that would be very handy.
Yeah. Because there's, to me, I'm thinking about, there's a much larger meso and macro size, biodiversity, but then when we get down to that size too, it's like trying to do an wildlife passage over I-91, that's a whole different ballgame. But if we're just talking about Green River Road or some of your other crossing points, where if we could get the town on board and engage conservation commission, if we had money for the materials to actually do that work, that would be a big win for you guys.
Yeah.
That falls outside of the NRCD, so it's the field office purview, and would be something that you could take to the state committee, and they might have some of the like larger NRCS programs that might.
So we couldn't do a hybrid project like that of some kind with this pool.
No. We can't fund things on municipal land, so like, it's the land.
Oh, that's a very interesting point.
So,
Oh.
well, I believe we could fund things on it, but like somebody would have to be the manager of that, like,
But a lot
I
of,
haven't.
a lot of culverts can be on private land.
Yeah, I mean, could Beak apply for that? I'm not putting you on the line, I'm just saying, could an organization like apply?
I don't know what your organization.
You're a 501c3, right?
Yeah, they can. They can, but you have to get land permissions and.
Sure. That's,
So, yeah,
Yeah.
but
I'm just trying to explore the out of box thinking. Because there's other capacities beyond our landowners,
yeah,
where we have a common interest that can solve the commons problem. Like, well, I can't do anything about it because it's somebody else's land, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's where our not-for-profit organizations. can
I would
do it.
definitely look to an NRCS staffer who's paid more than I am.
What is a question exactly about having a 401c
Just
being
invite
able to
employees the
manage?
higher status.
No, I'm just wondering, like, I'm just trying to get an understanding of like, so are you talking about if another organization could manage an aquatic organism passage, like have a
Yeah.
contract? And
Yeah.
so is this 401c? I'm not familiar with that.
Funny meal education
Code
environment, I'm
is-
just going to put Geek on the line, but.
Nonprofit.
Yeah, nonprofit.
A nonprofit, yeah, then we have had some issues with like the farm service agency of like being able to have like something to back up that land. So like if you're basically like, I'll use Vermont Land Trust, for example, if they want to like remove a bridge or something like that, then it's kind of challenging because there's no like backing for the organization who's managing the land, if that makes sense. Like they want to have like to have some type of, it's on the landowner, so it kind of gets a little bit of a sticky situation. Like Trout Unlimited has tried to do some projects on land, but if it's like not per se, like they don't own the property, then it's a little bit challenging to be able to follow through with that that project. And
Well, funny, the district does stuff like that all the time. And we don't own any land. So all our projects are.
We don't apply for NRCS through the fund.
No, not through NRCS funding, I'm saying.
Yeah,
though, that,
that's exactly. So that's the thing is it's if you're going to be getting NRCS, then you have to go through those. Like we haven't been able to move forward with some projects just because of them not owning the land, like Trout Unlimited, for example, or Vermont Land Trust. That's why I'm trying to give like that type of.
It's sticky.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess we're down to about 4 minutes. It's sounding like we have a pretty good idea on what we want to do, and it looks a lot like what we did last time. I think we will write a draft natural resources assessment and a draft conservation action plan, and then we'll schedule a follow-up meeting for anyone who's able to attend. So I'll email those out ahead of time so you can review them, and you can either send comments back via email, or you can come join us at another meeting to dig into those a little bit more. And then at that meeting, we'll also go through and actually decide on the ranking questions. That gets NRCS jargon heavy. So not everyone always wants to be part of that, but you're all fully invited and welcome to take part in that process. And NRCS will be a little more involved in that one because the ranking stuff's a little outside of our expertise.
Can I just ask a clarifying question about the action plan? Is it an executive summary or is it an actual action plan where like these are actions that we're actually gonna take?
This is the first time we've written one, so.
Because it sounds a little bit more like it's gonna be an executive summary and less that it's gonna be an actual plan with actions that you will actually be able to measure and be like, yes, we did those, no, we didn't.
I want it to be the latter.
Okay.
Because I don't need to write any more documents. It's in our shelf.
One in March and one in May, like the final product is due in May, and the first stage is in March.
The conservation action plan will be due to the state technical committee in March. Unfortunately,
Oh, when the decisions will be in May?
the final decisions, yes, I believe. Because the state technical committee will meet in April, and I think in May we found out that it's what wasn't.
And for the action plan, I mean, we do have the benefit that they're linked to the local fund pools, right? So we'll have all of the data from whatever does get ranked out this year. Unfortunately, we're just always years behind.
Yes, I think part of my hope with the conservation action plan would be that some of it will feed directly into fund pools. Some of it will say, hey, this can't be addressed through NRCS. So maybe the district is gonna do X, Y, and Z to try to move towards addressing this. It might not be, we're gonna get it done next year because it's a big thing to find funding and coordinate staffing and move in a direction that we haven't been going in before. But that's my goal is that the district's engaging in strategic planning very soon. We're working on a consultant right now. This should all flow together in a synergistic way. That's my job.
And it is not going to be a document, it just sits on the shelf.
Yeah.
Corey is assuring me.
Can I ask a follow-up question from last year? One of the things we talked about, I think it was at this meeting, was a practice for capture and reuse of roof runoff.
Of what?
For
Roof runoff.
We've talked about it, and we've gotten more guidance on it. So I guess I would say that was heard and done. I haven't seen it be executed yet, but we do have designs, and it sounds like the engineering staff is interested in moving on that. I believe that's in our small ag fund pool.
So that practice is turned on in Vermont.
Is it? I believe, yeah,
Okay.
yes.
The practices,
And
we do have standard designs for that with the small scale engineering guide that just came out. So that is public, it is provided, it is turned on, and it can be referenced through your small scale if that's what you so choose to include. So we're still working on some of those standardizations, but there are small scale engineering designs that are already in the draft and ready for us to kind of utilize and modify as needed for the ground.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
A follow-up question, so does that mean you need an engineer to still design that site specific, or you have
They
some
do need to
plans that are
review
kind of
them, yes.
scalable?
Was that a yes, you need site-specific designs, or?
Sorry, I think there was a breakup in the sound. Could you say that one more time?
Dana's question was, do you need an engineer to engineer that at each specific site, like as a unique set of plans, or are there kind of templates that make it more
We're
standardized?
working on streamlining it with templates, but there will be an engineer that's needed to review it
Correct.
to ensure that it still meets the needs to address the resource concerns.
Quickly, the other one that we talked about last year was contour farming.
Yep.
Which is not a practice that's turned on in Vermont, to my knowledge. We shared that with the state technical committee. Alexia, have you heard any more noise about if that's being talked about?
No, but I can add that to my docket when I meet with the rest of the disciplines. We have what we call conservation connection discussions with those disciplines where we can review some of this feedback that is provided and decide whether, how we can present this and what recommendations we can gather based on what you all have said. So I can add that if you want to send more details, through Olivia, of what some of those things you're looking at for contour farming, that could be helpful.
Emma's making confused faces at me right now.
Weren't all of the New England practice codes turned on for every state? It should be turned on, right?
TBD.
Okay. It's after 3. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you so much for taking 2 hours of your busy schedules to be part of this process. This works much better when we have lots of public and private involvement.
Well done.
Thank you, everyone. Take donuts and coffee if there's any left. I don't take anything out of here with me.
That's somewhere.